Hi there, boys and girls. Welcome to our vodcast on the needs of living things. In the last section that we discussed, we talked about how all living things must share 5 characteristics in order for it to be considered a living organism. So each organism needs certain items in their lives in order to ensure their survival. And there are 3 major items that they do need. All organisms need a place to live. Second, they all need water. And last, but definitely not least, they all need food. So tonight's lesson is going to be about the importance of these 3 items and how they affect the lives of each organism that lives here on Earth. So, what I'd like for you to do is open up your place to live flap and keep the water and the food closed, and then take a look at the notes that we're going to be filling out. So right now we're going to talk about the importance of a place to live. Now, our example to illustrate the importance of a place to live is going to be our national bird called the bald eagle. So as you can see in the background, you could take a look and get an idea as to the environment or the habitat that it actually lives in. The importance of picking out this area is because a place to live needs to provide an organism with all of its needs. So there are 3 major needs that each organism needs to have fulfilled. First of all, the environment must provide food for the organism. Second of all, the environment must also provide water for the organism. And then lastly, third of all, the environment must provide enough living space for the organism to live in. Here we have a picture of a bald eagle fishing. So as you can tell right off the bat that the bald eagle likes to eat fish. So that would explain as to why it lives around big bodies of water. Now, bald eagles, as you saw in the previous picture, like northern colder parts of the country. So you'll find them in the northwest and then all throughout Canada going further north. Big bodies of water are important because they like to eat fish, and as we know, fish live there. Fish in the water will provide the energy that the bald eagle needs in order to carry out its cellular activities. So the need for food is met for the bald eagle by living by a body of water, providing the eagle with fish. Now, the second need that we talked about earlier is water. Now, if you take a look here, you may figure that the bald eagle, of course, is going to live by a body of water because it needs water. However, birds such as the bald eagle don't necessarily drink out of the lake. They don't drink the water straight from the lake. They normally get their water from the food that they eat. So as we know, all organisms have water in them. So as they ingest the fish that they caught out of the water and brought up to their nest, the water inside the cells and the tissues of that fish are going to be absorbed by the bald eagle, and it'll meet its water requirements. Now lastly, we talked about living space earlier. Again, if you look at this picture, it's a pretty wide open, vast living space, which is perfect because living space is important in building a home. You want to be able to have enough space to build a nest if you're a bald eagle. And if the area is too crowded with bald eagles, another reason why you need a lot of living space, because if you have too many bald eagles in an area, all the bald eagles, they're going to be competing for the same food source. So there isn't going to be enough food to go around for everybody. The second need for living things is going to be water. So you should be closing up this place to live flap and pulling down your water flap. Now, water is important for all organisms, and there's various reasons as to why, and we'll talk about a few in a minute. Now, you should know that water is balanced by homeostasis in organisms. There are 4 major reasons why water is important to us. The water part of the blood, the plasma, is important because it's going to have some transport functions. So the first function that we're going to talk about is the transport of nutrients throughout the body. So as you eat something, your body digests it and absorbs the different type of nutrients, which we'll actually talk about in a couple moments, and then it'll dissolve into the plasma of the blood, or the water part of the blood. And as your part pumps the blood, all these nutrients traveling in the plasma are going to move out to your cells, and then your cells are going to get the sugars and the amino acids and everything that they need to carry out all the different chemical activities that they need to carry out in order to live. With all the chemical reactions going on inside of the cells, there are also wastes that are produced, and we have to get rid of the wastes. So some of these wastes actually dissolve themselves into the water to be carried out and be removed. And then lastly, all cells must need water to carry out chemical reactions. So these are the main reasons why water is important to us and why we need it. All right, so we're going to go to our third and last section of our notes, and that's going to be the food part. Living things need food because they need nutrients, and your body needs 3 major nutrients. These 3 nutrients are proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids, which are also known as fats. So you might want to put the words fat or fats in parentheses next to the word lipids. And we're going to talk about the importance of these different types of nutrients and what they do for us. Okay, so proteins. First thing that you need to know about proteins is that a protein is one big chain. And these chains are made up of subunits called amino acids. So these colored circles here, these are all amino acids. Now you can get protein from different sources of food, as you can see here on the bottom. But just to give you a clearer look, or a more inclusive look at the types of foods you can eat, you can get your protein supplemented to you by eating things such as meat, would include red meats and poultry. You can also get it from eggs. The egg whites in eggs is very high in protein. You can get them from nuts, beans, and legumes as well. So it's important to have proteins inside of your body because your proteins actually serve a pretty important function. So if you flip over to the back of your notes, you're going to see the parts of your notes that say, why are proteins so important? So let's take a look at that section right now. Okay, so we need proteins because they play two major functions in our body. First and foremost, proteins are needed for growth. Without having the proper amount of proteins in your diet, what can happen is that your growth can be stunted, or you may not grow to your full potential as you may have if you had the proper amount of proteins. So to help with growth, your body produces a hormone called growth hormone. So it helps you grow. It also helps you build muscle mass. So for those sports addicts out there who wonder what HGH does for athletes to help them perform better, it gives them more muscle mass so they can build up bigger muscles to make them stronger and then run faster or tackle a guy harder or hit a baseball further. So that's why HGH is being used amongst athletes, and that's why there's a whole outcry against it. This human growth hormone is created by a protein chain, and this is what the protein chain looks like. So when you link all these amino acids together, you create this long protein called growth hormone. All right, so that's how proteins help you grow, by being used in the production of growth hormone. Now next, another important reason why we need proteins is to build and repair tissue. If you know anybody that goes to the gym and works out pretty frequently, to build up that muscle tissue, what they'll do is after they work out, they'll drink a big protein shake. And the proteins inside of that shake will help go into the body and help the muscle tissues repair themselves. So this way, the muscles aren't as tired and as exhausted as they are for the next day when this person wants to go in. So the proteins help repair the tissue to help speed up recovery so this individual can work out just as hard, if not harder, the next day. That's why proteins are important. They're needed for growth and they're needed for repair. So let's go take a look at what carbohydrates do for us. Okay, so our second nutrient are called carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are basically the sugars that your body needs. There's two types of carbohydrates. You have simple sugars, or you can have starches. Carbohydrates include sugars such as glucose, which is the sugar that we need. So here's a picture of what glucose actually looks like when you look at the molecule itself. Now, your body can store glucose when you have a lot of it, and what they'll do is they'll take a bunch of glucose and then start to attach the glucoses together. And as they attach the glucose together, what you'll start to get is a chain of glucose. And these chains of glucose here would be known as a starch. So long sugar chains are called starches. Now you can get carbohydrates from certain foods, and the foods that you can find carbohydrates are really located at the top of this picture. You can get your carbohydrates from fruits, from vegetables, from breads, and pastas. Now, you'll hear a lot of people say that in order to lose weight, they'll cut out their carbohydrate intake and they'll cut it drastically low or try to eliminate it from their diet altogether. And there are diets that actually do that. But always remember, carbohydrates are the main fuel source for your body, so you need them. The only time carbohydrates become a problem is if you eat too many of them. Whatever you put into your body, you need to burn. Whatever is not burned and left over will be converted into fatty tissue. So yes, cutting the intake of carbohydrates down will help people lose weight as long as they are burning whatever it is that they're putting into the body. People should not cut out carbohydrates entirely from their diet because they are important sources of energy. Okay, so carbs are used to make energy. And the energy that they do produce for us comes in the form of a molecule called adenosine triphosphate. And you'll hear this molecule referred to as ATP throughout the rest of the year. Because who wants to say adenosine triphosphate whenever they're going to talk about adenosine triphosphate? ATP is the energy molecule that is produced when the carbohydrates in your body react with the oxygen. So it's called adenosine triphosphate because, as you can see, you have the adenosine molecule up here. And it's connected to a sugar called ribose. So remember we said last week that all sugars end in ose. So ribose is an actual sugar. And then it's called triphosphate because tri means 3 and phosphate is the element that's used in these groups. So you're going to have your phosphate groups, your 3 phosphate groups at the end. So this is what ATP looks like, and this is the energy that your body burns of every second, of every day, every month, of every year of your entire life. And then lastly, we're going to talk about lipids. Lipids and fats. Everyone says fats are bad for you. You shouldn't have them. You have to watch your intake on them. And some of that is true. We need fats in our diets, though, because our body produces fats for certain things. Actually, one of the biggest evolutionary reasons why humans made the big leap to where we are today is because our early plant-eating ancestors eventually evolved into meat eaters. And that fat content in the meat of the animals that they were eating actually provided the fat that would help myelinate or insulate our brains because our brain cells are covered in fat cells. Lipids and fats are really, really important to have in your diet, but as I said with the carbohydrates, you have to regulate or moderate your intake of them. Too much is too bad. And then there are also different kinds of fats that you have to watch out for. So there are 2 groups of fats. We have saturated fats, and we have unsaturated fats. If you take a look, you can probably figure out the difference between a saturated fat and an unsaturated fat, and it's not too tricky. If you see here, on the left, we have a saturated fat, and this is bacon grease. This is bacon grease at room temperature. So if you cooked up a whole bunch of bacon and all that grease spilled out onto the griddle or onto the pan, and you left it there, it would solidify at room temperature. Those are the bad fats to have. Any fat that's solid at room temperature is terrible for you. And the reason being is because if you eat too much of them, your vessels inside of your body that transport the blood that we talked about earlier to transport nutrients and oxygen will begin to fill up with fat. And as they begin to fill up with fat, as you can tell here, the width starts to shrink. And the smaller the space is, the tougher it's going to be to get blood through there, the less nutrients that are going to get out into your body, and if it closes up, it can lead to bad things. So saturated fats are fats that you need to stay away from and cut down in your diet, if not eliminate them totally. However, unsaturated fats are found here on the right-hand side, and unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature. So oils such as olive oil or avocado oil, those types of oils are healthier for you than the fats that are going to be solid at room temperature. So you need fats because some of the hormones in our body, just as we talked about how growth hormone is made from proteins, some hormones in our body are made from fats. Our body uses natural steroids, so it needs those lipids in it to work properly. Your cell membranes have lipids on the outside of them to keep everything inside of the cell and regulate what goes in and out. We couldn't make these particular types of things inside of our body that we use if we didn't have lipids and fats in our diet. So you just have to be careful of which fat you're going to eat. Stay away from the solid ones. Eat more of the liquid ones. All right, boys and girls. Well, that concludes our vodcast for tonight. Thank you so much for your time.